This is The Neutral Position, hosted by Nick Palmisano, bringing honesty and reason back into conversation. Here's your host, Nick Palmisano.
Unpleasant or repulsive, especially in appearance. Adjective. The word is ugly. No, we're not trying to describe your mom or that terrible spring break decision you made back in the day. We're talking about the most heinous, eye-bending, gag-inducing dog chew on the planet. We're talking about ugly chews. To you and me, ugly chews are nothing to look at. You see, when you take cowhide, clean it by hand, and sun cure it with no chemicals, it doesn't look like a cute dog bone or rawhide, but it also doesn't sit in your dog's stomach forever or cause digestion issues. So while we see a hairy mess that we don't want to touch in any way, shape, or form, your dog, the natural predator that he or she is, yes, even Mitzi the toy poodle has some wolf DNA in there. That dog just sees gorgeous, delicious, healthy nature. So when you're at the pet store scanning the aisle or you're online ordering the next tasty morsel for your canine companion to gnaw on, are you buying that cute bone or that rubber toy for you or for your dog? Because in your dog's world, that pretty, chemical-filled, tied in an adorable bow treat is a 6 out of 10. Tops. It's fine, it'll do, but it doesn't inspire. Why? Because to your dog, it's not natural at all. It's foreign. It's manufactured. It's a frozen dinner when you really want a perfectly cooked steak. In short, it's just not ugly enough. So if you want to give your dog the experience of a lifetime while Dreamweaver plays and the world moves in glorious slow motion, then get your dog an Ugly Chew at uglychews.com. That's uglychews.com. Hey guys, welcome to The Neutral Position. I'm Nick Palmisano, and I am honored today to have Dr. Keita Franklin on our show, foremost expert in mental health, suicide prevention, all kinds of things I'm not smart enough to understand. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with everybody today, and how exciting that you kicked off this new show. And yeah, happy also that you're willing to talk about mental health and
of course,
tough subjects like suicide prevention. These aren't easy topics. I'm a social worker by training. I have a long history of providing direct care to the active duty troops, and also working with veterans over the last few years, maybe the last 5 or 6 years, with a distinct focus on suicide prevention in the veteran space. And yeah, that's a little bit about my work background anyway.
How about some non-work stuff? Like, what is your favorite hobby right now?
I know, I'd probably say
is it something weird like archery? Like, you know, like you like to shoot like a specific kind of swallow or something like that?
I
with
might
a bow?
like to try archery at some point, but I've never
but
tried
that's
it.
not. But it's not your thing. So
Yeah.
what's your hobby right now?
I, at the moment, remodeled a house. And having had no knowledge on how to do that, so I was like studying how to do all the
you did all the work?
I did what we could. I did what I could, and then also hired out different types of people to sort of do it in a most economical way possible.
You hired out like the electrical and stuff, or did you do the electrical?
I hired out the electrical, but also to a friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What made you want to do that?
Well, COVID actually, started to research, the market got good, and there's a lake in rural Virginia called Lake Anna, and it's just like a place I've gone to every summer with my kids. We go there for the day and get out on the water, which is just absolutely beautiful. And then right time, right place sort of thing, and just bought like a total fixer-upper. It needed like top to bottom like redo, so it was about a 2.5-year project.
That's how, like, I grew up that way. So my dad is one of those guys that can like build like a house or a car from the ground up. So, you know, he would buy a house that was, I don't want to say dilapidated, because that gives the impression that there's like, you know, boards up on the windows. But the house that my parents live in, when they bought that house, the old lady who had just passed had like chickens in the attic.
Wow.
And
it's unreal.
And it was like horsehair plaster walls. And so room by room, as a kid, you know, you're helping, you
yes.
know? But those were my memories of like redoing this, you know, New England colonial house that had not been touched in 100 years or something, some crazy.
And this was long before they had all the do-it-yourself videos. Your father, like, he didn't have YouTube. He couldn't just like pop up.
He just started working when he was 15, that kind. So he just
knew how to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to do it because that's what you did. Anyway, going back to, the core of what you do on a daily basis, it's heavy. It's a heavy job, because even as a veteran, being around, it's such a big topic in the veteran community, suicide. How many, I don't even know anymore how many friends or acquaintances, have taken their life. How do you deal with, the topic on a daily basis? Like, how do you stay healthy?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I would never proclaim that I have it down. So it's like a work in progress. It's like our life's work to sort of figure out how to have good work-life balance. I mean, part of it is when you're making a difference and you can see the difference, it like drives you to do it again and do it again. And, the next thing, and there is like I don't know if it's like an adrenaline rush, but it feels good to help others. Like, it truly fills me up. And I hear that from my colleagues too. But there's a certain amount of training that they sort of teach you through graduate programs where, they, teach you how to practice good self-care and how to, help clients, and then know that you have to have balance in your life. And I try to work towards that. Sometimes I'm better at it than others. I love, getting out on nature trails. I like, and I have one right in my neighborhood. So sort of shame on me if I'm not out there. Like it's like literally around the corner from my front door, and there'll be times where I'm just not good about getting out there, and then other times I'll get out every day. So it sort of ebbs and flows. I try to have a long-term worldview with it. I try to do better more times than not.
Yeah.
So
you've created a number of things. One of the things that I've witnessed a few times that Sarah Verardo, the chief executive of the Independence Fund, refers to you as the architect of OpRes. Can you talk a little bit about that? And it's a very different approach that has been hugely effective. Like, how did you arrive at this idea, and what is the program?
Yeah, Operation Resilience, first of all, I absolutely love talking about it, so I'm so glad you asked me, because it's like one of my all-time favorite things. But for years in the field, we were trying to treat suicide through a medical model through a hospital. So there was this thinking that if somebody were struggling at risk, if I could only get them into therapy for 1 hour a week, all things would be better. And mental health care is absolutely important, and hopefully you and I can talk about that more. But mental health alone, 1 hour a week, it's not really going to solve the suicide crisis going on. And, we've always known in the literature that one of the biggest sort of, we say, protective factors or ways we buffer against risk is through connection. Social support, peer support, like connection with others carries you through the difficult times. And when Sarah Verardo first approached me, and I knew a little bit about the Independence Fund, I knew they had been doing some caregiver work. And Sarah said she wanted to do more. She had come back from this funeral of a veteran in her husband's unit. And we just had a very brief conversation about, like, well, sort of what does the Independence Fund already do? They had done quite a bit of work for caregivers, and I was trying to think of a way to use what they're already doing and what they're already good at. And Sarah suggested, what would it look like to reunite these units? And I thought it was an incredible idea because of the social support component, the peer support. And we know in the field of trauma that when people go through trauma together, it's a bond like none other. And so even if 10 years have gone by or 15 years, if we bring the veterans back together, it's like
they haven't missed a day.
If you've ever walked down the halls of the Pentagon and you see two people that randomly realize they're both stationed there and they've been deployed together, the embrace that they give one another just in the hallway will stop you in your tracks as a person walking by just to watch it.
Yep.
Because
the big grin on the face.
It's so incredible. So that was sort of some of the early beginnings, and we had to put together a full agenda for a Thursday to a Sunday sort of agenda, and we've gotten better with it each time. But the idea behind it is to bring the veterans together for some physical fitness, some social sort of breaking bread, mealtime together, reconnecting, and then also for them to have some they do a community project, and this idea of like paying it forward is also like feels good to them. And when we do it, I get right out there with them. Like we painted a porch for a wheelchair bound veteran where his wheelchair was caused the porch to erode over time, and we got out there, and while they're painting the porch, they're like they're talking about their deployment. They're talking about the 2 kids they've had since deployment. They're talking about, one that started a marina and sells boats, and all the other guys are super interested in this, and they never thought this veteran would sell boats, and how did you get into that? So they're just sharing.
Yep.
No one's looking at each other. They're all there with the paintbrush. So all that to say, it's like physical fitness, it's social support, it's pay it forward. And I do run some groups there. We run some groups. This is a funny part of this is we're very cognizant of like the veterans not feeling like they're in therapy, because it's not therapy. It's a weekend reunion. It's, but there is a level like we call psychoeducation. So we do some teaching, and they teach each other.
Yeah.
So we try to keep them condensed.
Yeah, but it's very social.
Yes,
like
it's very social.
It's not let me get you in the corner and make you cry kind of thing.
What happened in your childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. But each time after an Operation Resilience, we look at the evaluations, and inevitably the veterans want more group time, which always amazes me, because I feel like, I know they want to get out there and do whitewater rafting. They want to get out there and do the obstacle courses and all these other sort of fun things. But they do also want to unpack their issues too. So we should recognize the importance of that, I think. And it's pretty remarkable, I think, but I'm a little bit biased, I know.
Why do you think, I have my own theory, but I am definitely not a doctor. Why do you think veterans have such a hard time with transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the heart of it is this idea of identity. Like, you really embrace this identity of being a soldier, and you sort of, you wear it on your uniform every day, and you're with a group, and you all look the same, and you all wear the same, and you're part of a pack, and like a tribe, if you will. I've heard folks refer to it as and then you no longer are in the club. And what does that mean for you? Or are you in the club? Are the relationships deeper than just your service time? Are those lifelong connections, or was that like a 2-year assignment and you'll never reach them again? But it does center around identity and loss of identity. And I having never served and just humbled by all that the troops do and the veterans, if I were no longer a social worker tomorrow, that would not be good for me. I inevitably, when I meet people, I say, I'm Keita Franklin, I'm a social worker by
training.
training.
How you define yourself.
Yeah, so that would be awful for me. And I see that for other professions too, like nurses and firefighters and police officers, but it's so rings true so much with the veteran community.
So, my junior varsity theory has always been that, because this is what I felt personally and this is what I've seen, when you get out, you lose your tribe, absolutely. You also lose purpose, because you go from, your purpose is to defend the United States of America. And no matter who you are, you can be the most sarcastic specialist on planet Earth, or you can be, the most badass, chest beating E7 with every badge, tab, deployment, etc. That does mean something to you. It really does mean something to everybody. Then you get out, and I don't care what your job is. Because like I got out, I went to Duke University, I got a Fortune 100 gig with a good title and a good paycheck, and I felt worthless. So it doesn't matter what the job is if you don't feel some purpose in what you're doing.
Yes, I think you're right. Like loss of identity. And then is there a purpose that matches?
That's right.
Like that is the ultimate purpose, like to wear the uniform and defend the nation.
That's right.
And now if I were, I transition out, I work at IBM, I work at wherever, I'm a CEO at Walmart. I mean, fill in the blank. And
it was some of the hard parts of transitioning are you'd be in like a conference room and people would be emotionally freaking out about stuff that like you're just like, this is not this
like
is not
a low level
this
thing.
Is
yep.
Like, oh, so and so is mad, who cares, like it'll be fine, like we'll figure it out, we'll solve the problem, or oh, the picture was not, it's an older model of the thing, like calm down, so but when you don't feel like these things are meaningful,
yes,
you don't feel like you're meaningful. Like, what am I doing right now? And I remember being in and thinking, oh, and this is a common conversation, at least it used to be in the, the 90s, the 2000s, like, oh, I'm going to get out and make more money and life will be good. And I was making a ton of money. And, I honest to God, the worst that I've felt.
Well, money in the absence of purpose. Like,
yeah.
There
was a huge disconnect. And so, with OpRes, where you're Operation Resiliency, where you're taking these combat units that, another thing people don't understand is you deploy with a unit, you might, you spend a year in country, you come back, it's not like you all hang out. Some people will stay together, but typically you get back from deployment and people start PCSing or changing their duty station because that's the way the military works. Is you have your next duty station is X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
So they just had this huge emotional event, whether it was traumatic or not, where they were all together, where they were all working, towards a purpose, and then boom, they're gone. And some of those people, maybe they're ETSing. They're literally going from war to ETSing and end time of service. Like, they're literally leaving the service.
Yes. You bring up such a good point. I don't think you and I have ever discussed this, but in the day I was leading behavioral health for the Marine Corps under General Dunford, and we were coming up with a lot of mental health solutions to get after suicide. We were getting new counselors in the field. They called them MFLACs. We were pushing new respite programs. We were really going to get after this issue, and we were briefing the general, and he talked about this phenomenon of how they come back from deployment and they immediately get orders to their next duty station. We got into this discussion about what would life look like if they stayed in place for 90 days. And there were these folks in the room that were from Manpower, and they had these, and this is not my field, so bear with me, but these Manpower modeling methods whereby the Marines came back and there was a big system that sort of spit out where they went next, and they worked with their monitor, and they got on their way. And at that point, the general looked over at the Manpower folks and said, we're going to change the model, and I want all these Marines to stay in place for 90 days, and looked at me and said, we're going to write a policy memo on this. And of course, the Manpower folks were not happy with this.
Of course not.
I rode back from the Pentagon to Quantico with them in the same vehicle, and
they wouldn't talk to you.
These active duty Marines were majors. They were two majors. And
majors, no offense to all the majors out there. Majors are the worst people on planet Earth.
They were
and
not happy.
It's not their fault. It's like they've gone from being, extremely useful people and, company commanders, and then it's like, hey, you're going to spend the next decade being a staff guy, helping colonels make decisions, doing all of the work for the colonels, getting no credit. It's very rare that you meet a major that isn't bitter.
Yes.
It's like, I think major time should be like 3 years tops. It's like, all right, you're going to be staff for 3 years, and then you're doing something else, because they just become so bitter. One of the big reasons I got out, it was a serious consideration for me, is I looked around and I was like, man, none of these majors are happy. None of them like their life. Like, I don't want to be a major.
They're not like skipping down the Pentagon.
I don't want to be a major.
Skipping down the hallway with a big smile on their face.
It's the worst. And you're a major forever. Like, you're just a major forever.
Yeah, I didn't know this. But I knew they weren't happy with me that day in the vehicle on the way back. And
they probably have built, those people in that vehicle probably have built like 2,000 slides about this.
Yes.
And they have their perfect thing. And they've had to do 117 iterations with some colonel, and then it went to a general and he had feedback, and then another 117 so like they have their thing that they've invested probably years in, taken all kinds of crap from everyone, and then you're like, hey, your system is dumb.
Well,
which is great, by the way. I love it.
Thankfully, it was the general, but he he had the same idea, and we did that year make a change to the model. Marines stayed in place for 90 days with the thinking that like people would identify nuances in one another that a new unit wouldn't. Like Marines that had deployed together needed to be together so they could identify those nuances in each other and know if one were stressed. And sometimes the nuances are so small.
Yep.
It's a small little change to the demeanor, a small look on your face. And we did that. And I will tell you, the suicide rates went down that year by 14%. We don't know. We never scientifically studied whether it was that lever that got pulled that year by General Dunford. We don't know. It was also, there were a lot of other things going on in the Marine Corps that year. We had amped up a lot of interventions. But I often wonder that.
Well, I mean,
keeping them in place, and had we studied at, if we found an appropriate evaluation way to really study out those cohorts of Marines that stayed in place.
Well, and I know in the Army anyway, I know they're looking now at keeping people in a location for way more than 3 or 4 years. You know, now they're talking about, having a home station where you're essentially always coming back to the home station. So even if you do PCS somewhere, let's say, you're at Fort Bragg and you go to Germany for 3 years, like you're coming back to Fort Bragg, like you're saying, this is my home, and everything else is kind of a temporary journey, which I think is a good idea. I don't understand actually why everybody needs to move around all the time. I mean, I think if you don't want to be there, I think it's totally appropriate to say, hey, I'm going to move somewhere else. But why do people need to move every couple of years?
I was curious if you're going to say that was a good thing or not, because also we know like fresh ideas in leadership are also helpful. So like moving billets might not have to be duty stations, but
I think that, I think that that's probably true for maybe officers, maybe for senior enlisted, but I don't know that it's all that valuable for, especially like the early enlisted. Like, why are they moving around? Like, where are they? And when you're looking at a place like Fort Bragg, I mean, you can literally jump from multiple units, not see any of the people that you served with, in one unit, and be in a completely fresh environment without yanking your family out of a situation, moving away from all your friends. Like, I think the military needs to think about these things. But the problem, and I won't saddle him with it, but one of my peers, when I was still in the military 100 years ago, once said this to me, and it stuck with me, and I think he really nailed it. He said, and I know this is going to be overkill for you, but he said, the Army is an evil organization full of amazing people. And what he meant by that wasn't that like the intention of the Army is evil, but that the services don't really care about people. They care about mission. And the people are kind of like an after effect. And you see it by the way, if they cared about people, then it would be easy to solve finance issues. If they cared about people, it would be easy to go to the doctor. It would be easy, when you're having a bad time, to get help. It would be easy to do these things the way it is in a civilian world. Like if Julia's like, hey, Nick, I'm having a bad day, I'm not like, prove it to me.
Right.
It's like, hey, go home. That's normal in the civilian workforce, because even in the crappiest place, there's a certain amount of humanity to it. Well, the military's like, well, go to a doctor, prove that you're sick. If you're not, identify exactly what you're allowed to do. Like,
go to the doctor between 6 and 7 a.m.
That's
on
right.
This
And
day
if you miss it, you have to be at work. I mean, and I understand that people are trying to solve the problem of the 0.5% that are going to like mess with the system, but everyone else suffers, and you create an environment where, if you're a smart person, like at some point you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I, but on the flip side, there isn't a better job. My son is currently a lieutenant at Fort Benning, going through all the training that you
I
go
didn't
there.
know this. Congratulations to you for that.
Thank you. Well, I told him.
Incredible.
I told him, when he was like, I'm thinking about joining the military, I told him to go Air Force. He, of course, didn't listen. And, he's an infantry officer now.
Oh, my goodness.
So he's going through that right now.
And is that where you started also in infantry?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no, doesn't fall far.
Yeah, he just decided to make a bad decision as well,
Come on now.
But, he got an Air Force guy back here. Hollywood, what do you think?
I think that the 18 years of your influence could not overcome the logical and correctness of going into the Air Force.
I tried. And, Tim Kennedy pinned him. He's the one who he gave him his first salute.
That had to have been.
It was really cool.
That
really
had
cool.
to have been incredible.
But Tim gave him the same advice when he was thinking about going in, Tim Special Forces, and he was like, go Air Force. Everybody in the military gives the advice to go Air Force, because the Air Force actually does try to take care of their people. I mean, maybe not as good as a civilian organization, but I remember being stationed at this caserne in Germany called Friedberg that is now closed because it was so dilapidated. But I was stationed there, and the barracks that the guys were in were just terrible. I mean, like mold and gross. It was bad.
Wow.
So the Air Force people that were stationed there were getting like $1,000 a month extra because the conditions in the barracks were so bad that the Air Force compensated them for it. So they could, if they wanted to, move elsewhere or whatever, but they had that extra
There was
money.
a recognition.
And all of the soldiers were like, what the hell is this? But that's an organization that is trying to care about their people.
Focus on the people. Yep.
And I think the Army and and I'm not saying this, I'm not like crapping on, it's not like there's a person that is like, let's not take care of the troops, because I think everybody cares but the organization is not designed, and the Marine Corps is even worse. And the Navy's not much better. They are designed to create a mission, to execute the mission, and the fuel, so to speak, for getting the mission done are the people.
Yes.
And so
there is a saying, though, take care of the people and the mission takes care of itself.
There is a saying, and I think
it might be a saying alone. I don't, but
well, I think individual leaders try to do that.
Absolutely. I've seen so many myself.
But whether you're talking about whether it's the military or it's the government, we always have money for war. We never have money for the effects of war. There should be no issue with the VA. There should be no issue with benefits for people that need benefits. There should be no.
I agree. I could not agree more. Actually, I mean, the Department of Defense just released like a task force report results where they pulled together an independent group to look at some of the issues impacting the DoD and suicide prevention, and I think like 126 recommendations came out of it, and some of them are about like improving the conditions of the barracks.
Yeah.
And the report is focused on suicide prevention, but it really speaks to the importance of the fact that your environment matters. Does my leadership care about me? Do they have me in this mold-infested room where I'm, perhaps getting sick? Or it's all connected. And this goes back to our earlier conversation on like 1 hour of therapy alone, will not solve the issue. You have to sort of live and breathe and thrive in an environment where there's kindness, where there's caring and compassionate leadership, where you're able to connect with your battle buddies at the right time and place when you need it organically, and where you're able to get mental health care, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, are there any stats on like mental health like between Army, Navy, and like Air Force? Like, does one do better than the other? I don't know if you know that, but.
Yeah, I think over the years there are some stats that compare the services. I'm not current on them just in the context of the suicide rates, but I know for the first time this year, the Army's rate, the raw number, I should say, has gone down. So you saw the senior enlisted advisor of the Army come out on Twitter just last week and say, look, troops, the number's gone down for the first time, and we're the only branch where the number has gone down.
He's a good Sikh.
Let's keep it up. It was just a really succinct, strong message. I thought, that good on him that he pushed that out, and he screenshotted a copy of the data.
I'm surprised that they haven't come down on him, because he's such an aggressive Sikh. He's great.
I don't know him personally. I saw the Twitter account. I follow it to sort of keep up with some of the current day issues.
He goes for it, you know, and I appreciate. I feel like that's the job.
That's a good question.
I feel like that's the job.
But to Julia's question, also there's some data that compares active duty and the civilian population too. Mm-hmm. So you were talking about across service and these sort of things, but also the data that looks at just suicide in general and how it compares. And we see with the veteran population that the rates of suicide are significantly higher with the veteran population compared to their like-matched civilian counterparts or non-active duty counterparts. So it's the 10th leading cause of death in the nation. So it's a serious issue. You see even second leading cause of death for younger people.
Asking the question more broadly than just
looking
military.
At the numbers. Yep.
Why do we have more people, essentially than ever, wanting to take their own life when life is much easier than it ever has been? In terms of, there are fewer people going hungry. There are fewer people in true crisis. There are fewer people that have the challenge. If you live in this country, obviously there are exceptions, but for the most part, you've got a better gig than just about anybody else on planet Earth. Why is it that we are taking our lives in record numbers? Why is this, this is really like becoming an epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about this a lot in the field, and I don't know if the numbers are worse than they've ever been. I mean, one theory is that it's accounted for better than it's ever been. So, when someone dies by suicide, and how we sort of know whether they died by suicide is through the medical examiner and through the coroner, and it gets noted on a death certificate. And it's a taboo subject. So if you're like in rural Maine and you die by suicide, and in the day, did it get noted accurately, or would people not want to know that there was a suicide in the Franklin family? And maybe did I tell that, rural medical examiner, maybe they just were trying to give grace to my family, and so they didn't note it properly on the death certificate. So it could be a matter of data collection. It could be. But to get after your theory on like
subjectively, and this obviously there's no science behind what I'm about to say.
No, totally.
Subjectively, it absolutely seems like there are more people taking their lives now than there ever have been. Like, it happened when I was a kid, certainly. I mean, it always has happened.
Yes.
But I mean, it is constant now.
You hear about it. You do hear about it a lot. And I do think life is not always as easy now. I mean, I get that we have instant access. Like, you and I are not going to the library card catalog to look up information.
When I say it's easier, it is easier to take care of basic needs now than it ever has been. And so typically when people think about somebody having a hard time, they think about somebody that can't put a roof over their head, can't feed their family,
sort of Maslow's hierarchy stuff, food, clothing, shelter.
Exactly. For most people, we're really talking about, and again, I know there are significant exceptions to this, so I'm not trying to not be empathetic that there are people that don't have homes and don't have food.
The homeless, it's
I
an
know
issue.
I know it's an issue.
Yep.
But for the most part, when you're talking about poor versus middle class versus, I'm not talking about the obscene wealthy, but like wealthy in the you're really talking about a difference of luxuries,
Yes.
Like, maybe somebody can't buy steak, but they can buy chicken. Maybe they can't buy chicken, but they, or it's a lower quality steak, or, it's less now about they can't make it, and it's more that they're grinding to make it, which is challenging. Like, with the increase of resources, you would anticipate that suicide rates would go down.
Right. But it's not been the case.
It has not been the case.
Yeah.
It seems to be going the other direction as life has gotten, quote, easier.
More advanced, if you will. Yeah.
So that's something that I think about a lot, and I wonder, and I'm certainly not putting words in your mouth.
No.
I wonder, when things are easier, when you aren't worried about the basics, do you start self-assessing more? Do you start saying, what is it all about? What is my life really? Is my job meaningful? Is my life meaningful? Does my wife really love me? Does my husband really love me?
Yes.
Do my kids respect? All of these questions that are that you don't have time for when you're just trying to make ends meet.
Farming and out there. Yes.
Yeah, if you're working, you don't have time for this stuff.
Yep.
So I wonder if, because life is easier than it was, that because you're not worrying about, the bottom of the hierarchy of needs, that you are sitting around more thinking, what does it mean? What does life mean? Am I really making a difference? Does my life really matter? Does my wife really love me? Does my husband really love me? Do my kids appreciate me? And because social media is so present, it's very easy to look around and be like, man, Keita's crushing it. Why am I not crushing it? Like, Julia seems so happy with, McJosh, like, and, my wife's always angry at me, or, whatever, like the stuff that in our lowest moments, we kind of hold on to, is that a factor? Do you think that is a piece of this? Or is that just, me, a Gen Xer, imposing it was, better back in the day kind of like ethos? Because like the thought process for me is, you don't see, high suicide rates in, countries that are developing, because they are working so hard to exist. Like am I going to eat today is what they're thinking about. Am I safe today? Is somebody going to murder me today? They don't have time to think about what does it all mean. And so I think about that a lot, but I have no scientific backing behind it. It's just like Nick, late at night typing, thinking,
Theorizing. No, I think there's some merit to some of it. Like, are we more connected as a society now, or less connected? Like, we have more connection tools, but perhaps we're less connected.
I think we're definitely less connected.
And when you lack connection, you do start to have these emotional related questions that you described. I mean, we have in the civilian data, we see men over the age of 55 are at increased risk. And there's something to be said for have I lived my life the way have I contributed, what
kids are out of the house.
Yes, it's some life transition sort of stress. Yep. So I think it's a complicated issue. There's never one reason when someone ends their life, but I think some of these are factors. I know I often talk about the younger folks even. They, when I was a young kid, I grew up on military bases. My dad was active duty Navy, enlisted. And when I wanted to go outside and have a friend go play or something, I went down the street and, went to my friend's door and I knocked and, can you play? And either I accepted the rejection of no, they had homework or they couldn't, or,
That's right.
we went together.
Yeah, and you went to someone else's house.
Rode our bikes. And yes.
Yeah.
Now my own son, he, in the day, he puts on a headset and he goes into his game room and, he'll be in there playing, playing a game. Like, he probably won't like me saying, that he's, playing since he's, quite a big boy. But, and I will later ask him, how was it? How was your day? Did you play with your friend? And he'll say, yeah. And I'll say, well, who'd you play with? And he doesn't know. He just got online and people dialed in, but he doesn't know.
Yeah.
He doesn't know a single name.
Yeah. It's weird because.
But he had fun.
Yep.
But there was no connection.
We live in I don't know my neighbors, and that's on me. It really is on me.
Yeah.
I have a couple neighbors, like, we're friendly, like I wave and, if they need something. But when I grew up, you knew everybody on the street, and there would be barbecues that everyone on the street was invited to. Even if my parents didn't love them as people or whatever, it's like they were invited.
Yep.
They'd come over. Everyone would hang out, you know. You knew everyone in the neighborhood. And it was just like you said, like, you know, you could knock on a door and it wasn't a big deal.
Yes.
Like if someone knocks on my door now, you know, there's a whole, comedy skit by this Italian dude about this. I'm blanking on his name, but, you know, someone knocks on your door now, you're like,
did they text
what
me
the
first?
hell? Who is
Did they
this?
call me first?
You're like, you know,
what time is it?
You know, like who's
I'm not
at this,
expecting a visitor.
who's
Yeah.
at this door right now?
Yeah.
It's just a different,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, my kids, you know, my little guy who's 8, like he doesn't just run outside and knock on his friend's door. It's like my wife has to
Orchestrate it all.
orchestrate a play date.
Yes.
And, you know, who's going to be there. And, you know, and we are not helicopter parents, but it's the way it is now.
If you want to fit in and you want your son to have a play date, you have to
You've got to set up a play date.
time and a place and a plan, and they have to have a structured activity.
Yeah, it's like, man, can't they just run around the neighborhood?
I rode my bike to the base pool on a whim and decided to swim on a whim.
That's
and
right.
Went to the tennis courts later on a whim. And
come home when the street lights are on.
Yeah, so it is a different. So the social connectedness matters. I think technology is the thing you brought up about social media, where we're like comparing ourselves through others' posts, which we all know is, you know, not always true. And we've even seen people end their life by suicide. And when you look back at their post, you'll see that they have this, like, you know, timeline that looks quite happy and joyous.
Yeah.
So, and we also see the opposite, I should say. Like, when I was at the Pentagon, we did a study. We funded a study that looked at social media posts on people, active duty members that died by suicide, and we looked at the days and months leading up to their death, and we saw that they did also write on social that they were struggling with an Article 15, that they hated their unit, that they were geo-bachelor, divorcing, and this would all play out as well, and then they would end their life.
Do you think this is an opportunity? So I talk a lot of crap about AI, but I want to give it its due. Do you think this is an opportunity where AI could identify suicide risks, you know, by analyzing social media?
Yeah. I didn't know you talk a lot of crap about AI. I follow you, and I didn't know that, but 100% I believe in advanced...
I think it's a threat.
Okay.
I think it's a threat.
Okay. I didn't know that about your... Okay.
I think it's a real threat, and I think we're underestimating how much of a threat it is. But that's...
I absolutely believe in good use of data in a structured, protective sort of way to identify risk and to use it. And I think that will be the future. Like those in the field that are resisting it now, in the next 5 years, you'll see increased use. I mean, there are big data sets out there that can tell us today, like whether someone recently filed bankruptcy, had a divorce, moved 3 times in the last year, meaning they're transitioning a lot and their life is somewhat disruptive. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're on wife number 3. They're, you know, their address doesn't match where their kids' addresses are, so they're, you know, separate.
Yep.
They lost the identity of being a dad.
Yep.
You know, that's a whole nother line of. And there's data that could tell us that they're here in Durham, North Carolina, 20% of the people have this set of risks. And if we're not using that data to give them services and provide for them in a better way, not saying they'll always take it, I just sort of say shame on us. If it's out there and available and we're not using it as a field, we should. But mental health in general is usually late to embracing technology. So I think there's like...
Why do you think that is?
There's this human element to therapy that the field is built on, of connecting with people, looking at them eye to eye, and using the nature of your relationship with them to help them overcome challenges in their life. And so the profession is like built on that type of just super relationship based.
Is it an ego thing based on like I have skill as an individual? Like I can read people.
I am valued. I know human behavior. I've studied it. And whenever I get in a room full of new and up and coming, and I've done some teaching and graduate programs, I do talk about the fact that, like, yes, your relationship matters, and all of the things that go on in a therapeutic environment matter. And what other tools are you using outside of that 1 hour a week to inform your work? And how are you equipping your client to do well where they work, live, and thrive, not just in their setting with you, where they're able to process terrifically. But how do they problem solve when they, didn't get an invite to a party, or when they, didn't get the lead role on a new project at work?
So, you have a lot of reps. You have a lot of reps dealing with mental health, dealing with suicide prevention. If, the president and Congress gave you carte blanche and said, hey, budget's not an option, build a national program, I want you to cut the suicide rate by 50% in the next 10 years, what would you do?
Yeah, I have actually never got that question to that extent, like that. Like, if you were really in the right spot in time. So, like, I haven't given it a ton of thought, but off the cuff, I would say, like, I would change in terms of the mental health part of the equation, I would change the model in such a way that we're not, we have a shortage of providers in the field. Like, this is a known thing. We can't get enough people to come into the field. So we have a shortage of appointments available. So people struggle getting in. When they're at a point of crisis, they should be able to get in immediately. So I would sort of change the model in such a way that we have paraprofessionals, maybe associate's degrees, or peers, people that have been there, done that, like, whether it's vet to vet, or, consistent with the AA model in the day, where reciprocally people can help people in a peer support way. I would develop a model whereby people could get help in a continuum. Because right now what's happening is when anyone needs help, they're automatically into a licensed clinical social worker, which is the high end, or a licensed psychologist or whatever. But some of their help along the way, when it's sort of like what we would say in the military, left of boom, they could get help by a friend. And friends should be equipped. Friends should know how to ask the question, are you thinking of ending your life by suicide? Parents should ask the question.
Yeah.
There's a set of screening protocols that go with this. But we should teach everyday people how to be more helpful. And then associate's degreed people, like technicians, kind of like we do in the military. They have like mental health techs in the military, like psych techs. You might remember working with them in the day. But associate's degreed. And then there's a place for bachelor's degreed people to engage and help people with life skills, navigating relationship breakups, navigating stress management, anger management, navigating how to parent. So at the bachelor's level. And then, no kidding, when you're struggling with a diagnosable mental health problem, you should get into that level of care. Right now, we just wait
until it's a crisis,
and then we get them into this level.
Yes.
So redesigning the model would then free up some of the access, let people get help left of boom.
Yeah.
And then, ideally, the people that were treating the issues would get sharper at their skills. They would, increase use of accountability. We need more accountability in the mental health field for using evidence-based care too. Like, this is not social hour when you're in for therapy. It's not, people shouldn't be in therapy forever. Certainly touchbacks when life struggles, 6 sessions, 8 sessions, you're doing okay. You're maybe you come back later. Yeah. You lost a parent, you're going through a period of grief, something. But just more accountability on the system and redesigning the access to care would, I think, be part of it. And then definitely we need increased focus on some of the things you and I talked about around how do we get people to a place of increased meaning and purpose, and dealing better with identity loss. And that's not an overnight solution. Like, we always talk in the military about culture. We've got to change the culture. Well, in society, we also have to change the culture of making sure people are tending to things like mission and meaning and purpose, and getting matched to life.
I also think that when you start saying things like change the culture, it's a cop out, because
it's like water. It's everything, everywhere, all the time.
I mean, what can you change? You can change you, and really that's it.
I can change myself today.
Yes, that's it. So when you're talking about changing the culture, you can say you can start acting a certain way. You can encourage other people to act a certain way. But the idea that you're going to, change the way the world thinks about all things, it's not. It is a cop out. It's the same thing as saying I'm not going to do anything. To me.
Yeah.
To me.
A lot of research on culture. There's a lot of research out there about particularly military culture. And I've agreed over the years, because to me it's not actionable enough right now. We got to get moving on the problem, and we got to get moving today. And so when we say we're going to change the culture, to me it's like a long-term sort of thing. But then I also hear my colleagues will say well, Keita, we got people wearing seatbelts, and people are not smoking cigarettes. And that took decades. And people now wear bicycle helmets, some You know, I sometimes see some that don't. But so those were cultural changes that happened. You know, people live their life differently. And so I sometimes struggle with that one.
When you care about something, you measure it.
Yes. That which isn't measured, yes.
If you know, so like you want to increase, you know, the number of people that are going to mental health professionals, you make that something that company commanders are graded on. Period. All of a sudden, everyone will be going to get, you know, a mental health checkup, at least on whatever condition is necessary for that company commander to get the check mark that doesn't tank his career.
They track dental. Like if you have a guy that hasn't gone in for their dental, you know about it. Yeah,
you get slammed. So if you want to change the culture, I mean, I really think it's as simple as, what are we going to grade to make sure that these people are actually being taken care of? So until you see that, I don't think they care.
Yeah, and I don't want them sending troops in for care to check the box, but I do want it to be okay if you're not okay. In this unit, I want people to know that if you're not okay, we'll get you care and you still belong.
But
you're still with us.
That box checking can be, it can literally be that associates.
Yes.
That volunteer.
Which would be less stigmatizing, right, too? Like, I just went to this lower level care. I got a little help for my stress. I know how to do deep breathing. I know how to walk away and call somebody I trust now and do a quick 5-minute, like, power up, get a little booster, and I'm back in the fight, and I'm okay with it, and all is well. Yep.
And the box check would catch one or two.
Absolutely.
On the edge, and
I think you're right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you can catch one or two through this box check
that
you're talking about with the company commanders, that would make people more susceptible to going and getting help.
I mean,
also.
and you can make it you can make it easy. Like, come in and bitch. Like, I mean, you could even call it a bitch session. Like, hey, and I know obviously the army won't do that, but but come in. You know, no one's going to go after any of the people that, like, but come in and like, hey, what's bothering you? Like, my sergeant, my platoon leader's a jerk. Here's what happened. I got this girl pregnant. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, you start laying all these things out. They're telling somebody, they're laying it out. They're getting a little bit of emotional support.
Yep. And ways to cope, like mapping out different ways to cope. Yeah. Because, I mean, something's probably said, particularly for these young people today, they grew up in a way that they may not have learned to cope like generations before them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how well the video game generation, are learning how to solve problems.
One of the biggest challenges, so every generation, like, and I talk about this a lot. I think this generation's really amazing with a few things. I think they learn quickly.
Yes.
I think that they are incredibly empathetic. I think that this generation is going to do a lot to kill racism because it's a very tolerant generation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that most of the stuff we argue about now has more, when we're talking about race or we're talking about religion, has a lot more to do with our generation as the remnants of, the baby boomer generation and the baggage that they carried. But when I see, this generation is incredibly inclusive. Where this generation falters is they have not in childhood developed mental resiliency. They didn't have those adventures. They didn't have to ask girls out in person and get rejected, or even have them say yes. Like, there's the stress of that. They haven't had playground fights, because now if you get in a fight in school, you're essentially expelled, or at least it's a huge deal. People press charges on kids getting into a fist fight. Like, it's like, what is wrong with you?
Yes, it is a big deal.
But all of the things that that you had to learn, to deal with, their life is cruel, and one of the hardest things as a parent is watching your kid go from, like, kindergarten, first grade is like they're still all sweet and fun. And somewhere around 3rd, 4th grade, you start to see like there's a couple of bullies. And by the time they're in middle school, there's some straight up assholes. And I feel comfortable saying that. And it's on the parents, you know, but it doesn't matter. But those kids are going to give your kid a hard time. And then your kid has to learn how to deal with that. And so this was natural for our generation. It was very natural that we had to deal with all of these things. And we were, not only were we expected to deal with them, but like even the feedback from our parents was like, well, that's life. And, you know, if somebody, you know, punches you, you punch them back. And, you know, that was the feedback.
Not everyone's fair.
Yeah. Life isn't fair. You know, that was a common thing. Whereas this generation expects like fairness, equity. They expect that their contribution is always valued. They expect that they're always right. They expect that they are the best. They expect, and the positive of that is they believe they can do anything. The negative of that is when they can't, there is a period of time where they fall apart. I think this generation is going to have serious problems with mental health and suicide because that mental resiliency has not been built. And so I think about that a lot because when I counsel a young person, you know, an employee, I can see them dying inside.
Yes, I know this phenomenon too.
And when I'm counseling somebody that's like 40, like, hey, I need you to do this, or 35 or whatever, it's a totally different, they're like, got it, understood, you know, and they
take it in stride and
they take it
forward.
They take it in stride, but it's interesting.
Like cohort effects and tracking the effects of cohorts over time and looking at the nuances that you just described in cohorts and sort of analyzing how do those nuances map on to suicide and mental health risks and what are the big picture impacts to those entire cohorts, whereby the nation could come to bear, I guess it's a little late, but for additional resources for those cohorts and then correct the next generation that comes up so that we're not continuing to make the same mistakes when we think about different generations and whether or not we're instilling some of that early on.
What's cohorts?
Cohort, like just like the group of people. Am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, no, you said it right. No, Hollywood just thinks that everyone's dumb. I'm just messing with you, man.
Yeah, what's another word for cohort?
No, I use cohort all the time. It's
all
fine.
right.
We have a very intelligent listenership, and I believe in you guys, and I believe that you know the word cohort. I'm not like Hollywood here, Mr. Air Force.
Hollywood's used to working with me. So
You guys are who? You have fun together, don't you, on this set? No fun allowed.
No fun.
This is all fake.
We have scripts and little earpieces, and then people are feeding us.
There's like zero script. Let's make sure everybody knows that today.
Quigley doesn't have fun here. She hates it. Hey guys, Dieseljack Media has just opened up our new studio. And while we're getting things spun up, I've tasked the team with making as many videos as possible. To kick that off, we are launching a limited time $500 video option. Here's the way it works. You go to dieseljackmedia.com under video production, choose the $500 video, purchase it for $500. You get to choose one of three things. How weird do you want the video? Do you want it normal? Do you want it a little funky? Or do you want it weird as Once you choose that, you reach out to us at hello@dieseljackmedia.com. We'll write you if you don't write us, and we'll ask you to send us your product or tell us about your service. Then we execute. You don't get any say in the matter. We turn it around in 1 week. It's going to be a high quality video that you can absolutely use in an advertisement, depending on how weird you wanted it. And that's it. And so far, it's been a phenomenal product. We've made a lot of small businesses happy. If you're a small business and you need a video on the cheap featuring your product, featuring your service, or just as a joke to one of your friends or something like that, the $500 video at dieseljackmedia.com is the way to go.
I did want to say, though, on the generation topic, I do find that interesting because I do think I'm 25 and my generation, and even the generation
You're raised
me,
older, though.
I was. I'm the youngest of five. So.
Okay.
And how old your oldest sister is my age, right?
Yeah,
or close to it.
Yeah. So I have that for me. But I do think the younger generation takes their mental health really seriously, to the point where sometimes I see on like LinkedIn that they just leave a job after 2 weeks because it's like, it didn't really make me happy for like the time that I was there. So I know you're like, they expect these things. I also think they demand these things. So it's like they've seen the cycle already with like the people that are older than them, or they've worked with like boomers, and then they see that and they're like, I don't want to go through that. And so then they
I think you're right.
expect, and I think they do expect, but I also think it's something that they're starting to demand of their like employers.
And what is the demand, Julia? What are they demanding?
I think they demand all the respect, and then they also demand to be seen and heard on like every single subject.
Yeah.
But how do they take when they're told that their performance is not good, or when they're being told that the problem is them? Do you think that they have the ability to grasp that, or do you think they just think that's the person not taking care of their mental health?
No, I think they can get the feedback. I mean, most of them went through college, and we've all gotten critiques from professors, and I don't think it's that.
Yeah, but college is a joke.
Well,
College is a joke.
but when you get to that, I think when older people hire younger people, that generational difference is just so big that it's really just, I think, a lot of miscommunication. So they might say something that they think is fine, but like to them today, they're like, why would you say that? Like, you can't say that anymore. I think it's a lot of that. I just don't think they can see eye to eye as much as maybe we used to be able to. Generation.
Communication differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, at one point I had an engagement where I was working with younger people, and it surprised me that generation 20 to 30-year-old got on a call. We were talking about a tight deadline that needed to go well into the evening, where and this was more than once I've seen this, where they are just like, no, thank you. My work day ends at 5. I'm tending to my work-life balance, or I have other engagements, and they're just like ready to check out. And in my earlier years, I would have never thought to do something or say something like that. And it's a double edge, because I appreciate that they're focused on the work-life balance and that they're tending perhaps to their mental health, and balance is always good. The mission is equally important, and I look at them and think I could have never done it, and so it is an interesting phenomenon.
Do you guys think that COVID has a lot to do with that? That people like are demanding more boundaries, or they have more boundaries that they're willing to stick to because they worked from home for a while, so maybe they didn't have to work past 6 o'clock. So they're like, well, I got all my work done between the hours of 9 and 5. Why would I have to keep working? So I don't know if COVID plays a role in that as well.
I feel like all of that's going backwards, though. Like I don't.
Remote work and
companies are starting to pull people back in, and I don't think remote work is as good. I think a hybrid is great. I like to give people flexibility, but I don't think you get as much out of remote work. And but more importantly, I don't think you have bonds with your coworkers.
Back to our earlier conversation. Yep.
When you're just doing remote work. I mean, almost every problem that we've had organizationally is when there is like folks that have a significant amount of remote work, even if they're great people that work hard, because when you see somebody every day, like, Quigley is a smart ass. And even though I try to be a kind person every day, but I know when we're talking, I take things well because I know her.
Yep. You see her every day. You're in person.
Same thing with Dan.
You have
Same
a
thing with
relationship.
Hollywood.
Yep.
Whereas if somebody's not in the office and they make some kind of sarcastic remark, you start wondering, like, was that biting? Is there anger behind that? You don't see it in the same way because you don't have that constant connection. And I think that is a problem. And I think, I'm very active on social media. I see a lot of people, kind of saying like, there's no reason for me to do anything but remote work. It's better for me. It's better for this. And I do think that like a hybrid solution, like we only mandate that people are in the office 1 day a week. Monday, everybody's got to be in the office. Okay. After that, it's up to you. And the reality is it's kind of split about half and half. I'd say just about everybody's in the office at least twice a week. And then like me Julia, Dan, actually the people here plus a couple more are in every day because I can't work from home. I'm bad at it.
Yeah, it's like know yourself, know
Yep.
what you're good at, know
And
your
then
skills. Yep.
Other people like to be in, like, you know, especially the editors. They like to be in a dark room and with no one,
Quiet
nothing around,
time.
quiet,
Yep.
and
No interruptions. Yep.
but having some connection so that you really know everybody, I think, is super important. But I do, you know, I believe strongly in a work-life balance for my employees, not necessarily for myself, but for my employees. That being said,
That might be something we need to talk about.
you know, on the random moments when something is a crisis and we have to get something done for a client, like if one of my employees was like, I need a work-life balance, I need to go home, I'd be like,
It wouldn't sell for you.
no, it wouldn't.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it wouldn't because we work so hard to give people flexibility, time off, good benefits, like all of these. We work really hard as a small organization to do these things that if it, like, hey, this is a big deal, we have to get this done, and you're like, can't, work-life balance, it'd be like, all right.
Well, I think they create some duplication in the system so that while one can't, another one can. And there's like, you know, there's like.
And I'm not talking about
team.
like, oh, I've got something planned.
Yes.
You know, that's different.
Yes,
That's like, hey,
yes.
like, you know, my husband and I are going to a show. That's different. But
Yep.
just like, I don't know, I would be aggravated by
There's
that.
enough flexibility here, except for the four of us that are sitting at this table with Dr. Franklin, for people to have time off. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's enough of that once or twice, you know, having to do that shouldn't be a problem, unless, like you said, they've got something planned, because people can pretty much take off a day if they need to.
Yeah, whenever they want.
Without any problem at all.
Yeah.
But it gets back to what we were talking about generational cohorts and their thinking.
Yeah,
Coming
I mean,
into the
and listen,
workforce
I'm sure-
and the things that Julie was saying, like, do they demand this, and and that their cohort will be different than the one that we grew up in.
Yeah. But it, you know, I don't know. Maybe I look at it differently, but it's like, let me put it another way. Would I fire somebody over that? No. But if the company suddenly had like issues financially and you needed to make cuts, that person would be at the top of the list because they're not committed to the mission. You know, now it'd be different if it was like, hey, we're all going to work 90 hours a week, and you know, then but that's not the environment that I have here. But I also am sure that there are employers that are like very loosey-goosey with all of it, and they would just tell the client like, hey, we're going to have to do this tomorrow because, you know, work-life balance. And there's something to be said for that too. But,
Yeah, it's a hard.
But the environment that I have is like, if a client says this is a crisis, I need it, then it's a crisis for me.
Yep.
And like Dieseljack Media is going to get it done, and I expect that the employees are on board with that. But then if she works late, you know, she can then take a day off.
Yeah.
You know, she can then and that's.
And it's such a good conversation, I think, in the context of our earlier conversation about mental health, because taking care of mental
And
health.
I'm not talking about Quigley. Quigley's like,
No.
she's on it.
She's on it.
But
I have tomorrow off though.
yeah.
Yes. Talking about mental health in the workplace is what more workplaces should be doing. And so whether it's like starting staff meeting with like, you know, a check-in, a mental health check-in, or just talking about it. People spend 40 hours a week at work. And if one of our own on this team were struggling, it would be good for you to know as a leader, because this is where they spend the bulk of their week.
Yep.
And so infusing mental health concepts into the organic day-to-day flow of any company is a win. And so, like, I just appreciate that we can visit about it on the show today.
So what should we do to make sure Quigley's good to go? What should I?
Respect her work-life balance when you can, and
When does like the demand kind of like, where's the line between like demand and entitlement? You know, like someone younger who's just starting, it's like, well, I demand this and this and this. It's like, you know, and then where is the line between it's actually what you need versus it's an excuse not to do anything? So
yeah, like if it's a pattern over time versus
No, it's a good question. It's a good question, Dan, because, even as we were having this conversation, and you were talking about, you know, like there's a demand for, you know, a certain amount of respect. Like I always come back to like, you know, respect is earned. Like you have a certain amount of respect as a human being. Like I don't swear at people. I don't, I don't yell at people. Like if somebody has done something wrong, we have a conversation. Like it's never personal. Like if you did a bad job at something, I would never say like, oh, you're a bad person because you did not complete this task correctly. But some people do. Some bosses take things very personally and they think it's, I don't think anybody tries to do a bad job. Like I think everybody wakes up in the morning trying to do a good job. But, if we're talking about mental health, my opinion is not worth what your opinion is worth, because you've put years into becoming an expert and you've studied and you really have put time, effort, knowledge. So if I was just like, I don't think so, I don't think you know what you're talking about, my opinion is the right opinion, everyone rightfully would say like, this guy's an idiot. What is he talking about? He's not an expert. There is a moment, and this is what's the line where it's like, well, my opinion should be respected. Well, sometimes your opinion is stupid. Sometimes you don't know what you're talking about because you don't have the reps. Like if we're talking about film, I'm listening to Hollywood. Why? Because he's been making movies since there was no sound.
I am too. I am listening to Hollywood as well over the years.
and so I do think that there is this and I don't know why we're talking about the generation, but we got here, so we're here. So I'm going to take it all the way.
Take it.
This generation not when I say this generation, I don't mean every person.
Sorry, can you also clarify like what age range? Like when you say generation?
I'm thinking about people that are kind of 21 to like 30.
Okay.
Is what I think. I see a significant difference in 21 to 30-year-olds from a decade ago, because I've been an entrepreneur for a long time now. A decade ago, people still kind of were of a similar ilk of my generation, like work hard, learn, earn respect. Whereas, your generation is like, I'm great, respect me. And pros and cons to it. There's pros and cons to it. But, there is a disrespect for experience, as if the 78 years that Hollywood has been doing film doesn't matter.
100
doesn't
years.
matter because someone has a degree and they made a cool video that they think is great. But like, Martin Scorsese's calling and hiring this guy, but like he doesn't know what he's talking about. It gets weird. That's where it gets weird. Is I don't know. I think that the parent, and it's essentially my generation, right? Like we did something wrong, Gen X and young boomers, where, I think we just told kids that they were great and that
Everyone
they were perfect.
Got a trophy kind of theory. I mean, I do talk to younger folks just about like owning your expertise and how long that takes. Mm-hmm. I mean, to become an expert on something, like, I mean, not only the X number of years of school, like up through PhD and more, and not all technical fields require that level of education, but still like hard, rigorous study. And then it doesn't end. You have a reading stack every night where you're reading the latest journals. Like you are living and breathing your content all the time, so that when the latest report came out in your field, who wrote it, who you know what part of it you disagree with, what part of it you agree with. Like where do your 2 feet stand in the context of your field, so that you can become an expert, and then moving to a place where you're publishing on your content, where you're speaking on your content, you're always open to feedback on your content. Particularly opposers. Like I want to hear the critiques of people that believe that suicide is a mental health alone issue, or I want to hear the critiques of people that believe that it shouldn't happen in the workplace and the work is for work, and thoughts different from my own, so that I can further develop and see if what they've shared has value and doesn't. It's a lifelong piece of work.
As an expert, you're open to being wrong.
Oh, 100%. Like, yep.
You're open to being wrong, but you have this world of knowledge that you're constantly checking information against.
Yes, and then as you advance in your career too, like at the policy levels, and you're thinking about like our example of General Dunford and our work to change the manpower model policy for the entire, 202,000 Marines at the time. The best people in those roles can also go back to like when they saw a client and what it was like to see their first client, and can remember, working boots on the ground with people in crisis, can remember doing home visits with new moms, can remember like, when I was a new social worker, I worked in child protection in North Dakota, and I remember going out to casinos and looking for parents before we took a kid into care, like to give a parent that one last try because they left their kids home alone unsupervised.
So they could go gamble.
So they could go gamble, and the kid started a fire in the living room or whatever. You kind of come up through the system when you're talking about reps, seeing clients, being able to remember what it was like to be, overseas, and failure to adjust, and is this really an adjustment issue, and is this really just normal because you're in Germany now and it's hard to adjust? It might not be a mental health issue. It's in fact the normal, issues that come with moving overseas. But just this idea of taking clinical experience on the ground, and also this supervising teams and seeing what other clinicians are going through when they're seeing clients. Now you're seeing it through a different level. And then to this policy level, that all the reps that go to that do allow you to like crawl all over the problem across multiple angles to kind of come to where you stand on it.
Yep.
Like I didn't just come to it because I read it in a textbook last year, or, I went to a symposium last week and I heard it. No, like I've come to it from, so.
The best part of that is all the mistakes we've made.
Oh, 100%.
And I still make mistakes to this day, and that's the best part of experience. It's not that I've been doing it for 100 years, as Nick says.
Yes.
It's because I've made so many mistakes that have made me better at what I'm doing.
Yes, like I have a list of them. It's endless of the mistakes. And as I've like gotten more reps at things, I've also like gotten more patience. Earlier in my career, I had like a lot less patience for like whatever our metrics were. We were going to see you 5 clients a day was the metric. If you were on my team, you saw 5 clients a day. Like if you didn't see 5 clients, like we need to talk about why. Like what and that was like early in my career, and it's just like, well, maybe they're just not in a good mindset to see 5 clients that day, and maybe that's okay, because if they saw them, they wouldn't be doing their best work with them, and it would impact that client's outcome. So like, let's slow down here a little bit. So like I definitely through mistakes have learned to, be better at some of this work. Yeah.
Yeah. All of us, right?
Yeah.
Literally
so
everything.
I appreciate Hollywood though for bringing that up, because it's like so true. Like the best people on your team are usually the ones that have made mistakes and have stayed with you.
Yeah.
And
there's in my world there's an increase in investors that want to invest in entrepreneurs that have actually run businesses for a while and failed. Right? The old thinking is, you only want to bet on people that have won.
Been successful. Yep.
And in fact, like if you really think about, if somebody, ground for 8, 9, 10 years, ran a business, and then something happened, and then
they lost it.
Like that person has so much knowledge, and the failure is so profound that they are going to be heavily invested in not ever being there again.
Oh,
and
yes.
so, why would you not invest in that knowledge?
Yes. It's a good way of putting it.
And it's interesting though, because, and I don't know if this has changed because it's been a long time since I've been in corporate, but I remember, when I worked, for a Fortune 100 company, there was definitely a fear of failure, because you could win 10 times, but if you lost the 11th, that kind of got hung around your neck as, it wasn't like the lump sum of your efforts, which was definitely, this, but it was like, man, that one time so-and-so, and it would not kill career. It's not like people got fired, but it would cap people. And so you ended up with a series of executives that made only safe bets and never wanted to take risk. Now, it's an old company that I worked for, and the culture probably was more along the lines of, hey, we're very good, let's make safe bets, let's continue to grow. But it also gave rivals opportunities to jump ahead in a few areas. So it's, I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that, losing isn't that big of a deal.
How you recover matters.
How you recover matters.
Adversity is when you can get through adversity, you're better for it.
Yeah.
We have a term in mental health called post-traumatic growth, and it's this idea that, like, by the very nature of this trauma, like, you're a better person. And some folks new to the field struggle with that. Like, when it's particularly, they'll be in front of an amputee, a double amputee, who's, struggling with their new normal. And when you hear that they tell you that by the very nature of their wartime experience and loss of limb, they are at a better place than they were before this happened, emotionally, physically, relationship-wise, it's a hard concept to grasp, but it's until you see it, you know that it's absolutely true. Like this idea that, like, thank goodness for that adversity.
Well,
where I am.
I think any adversity probably teaches you a few things, right? So I think first of all, you learn you can deal with it, which makes you mentally far stronger.
I can do it.
I can
do it myself sometimes even. I can do it. Yep.
You start getting this mindset of, I can handle anything. I might not have the answer right now, and I know it's going to be hard, but I can handle it. I'm going to be able to handle it. The other thing, though, is I think that every time you fail, a little bit of the ego gets chipped away and you become more empathetic towards other people. I definitely had a bigger ego when I was 20-0, because life, I had mostly won, but winning back then was like, I got into a good college and I was a good athlete, and I passed Ranger School and I did well, and winning was very, it seemed like big deals at the time, but looking back, like, none of this stuff is that big of a deal, right? Yeah. But when you fail, you got to reassess, so like, my first business almost failed a few times and I had to save it through superhuman efforts. My first marriage failed and I had to self-assess, like, how did I ruin this? What did I do wrong? You start looking at it, and all of a sudden it's like, when somebody is having marital troubles or they're having relationship troubles, I don't judge anybody anymore. Right. Because I've been there and I know that I failed and I was trying real hard and I still failed.
It's complicated.
And when somebody's business, something happens and they're like, and other people might be saying, oh, he doesn't know how to run a business. Like, that's not true. Things happen. You can lose clients, you can lose accounts, you can have an employee do something crazy. You can make a bad decision and trust the wrong person, invest in the wrong thing. Gamble that a product is going to work and then it does. Like, so many things that a capable person can do that will end up with a bad result.
Yes.
And so because of that, I just look at life very differently. Like, if 25-year-old me was sitting here, I'd be much more arrogant about my opinions. I would be very very convinced that I knew what the answer was. And the older I get and the more that I learn, the more I read, the more experiences I have, the more reps I have, I actually am less and less convinced that I have the right answer.
The less you know, right?
The less that
solid, yeah.
And actually that's one of the reasons I start this show, is because I want to hear from intelligent people and hear about their experiences and maybe kind of reassess my own through the lens of what they know. Matt DeMaio was sitting in Northeast Africa with his Marine unit, and he was hungry, really hungry. The meals ready to eat that he was issued weren't getting the job done. The protein bars his parents sent tasted like mush, and the other members of his unit had eaten all the crayons available. Matt was left unsatisfied. So he did what every Marine does in a crisis. He baked. And he baked and he baked and he baked and he baked until he had his eureka moment. Albert Einstein emerged from a room of chalkboards and gave us the theory of relativity. Michelangelo gave his life and eyesight to bequeath upon us the Sistine Chapel. Bob the caveman was tired of carrying everything, and he chiseled out the wheel, and our world was forever improved. Matt emerged from his kitchen with the Condition 1 Nutrition Protein Bar. Like those previous lesser inventors, Matt changed the world. No longer would we be stuck with protein bars full of processed foods and low on taste. Now we'd have something healthy and delicious. And if you're worried that this all sounds too complicated for a Marine, Matt brought in a SEAL type to assist with the formulation, so you know it's fancy, and likely has a glorious head of hair, a book, and a movie in the works. Condition 1 Nutrition. Your protein bars don't have to suck. Visit them at gocondition1.com. That's gocondition1.com. We are getting very close to the rapid fire round, where we pull things out of a hat.
Okay.
That young Quigley here prepares with earnestness.
Rapid fire. This was not told to me ahead of time.
Well, we have to have some
This is a
surprises.
surprise.
Okay.
We have
All
to have
right, we
some
have
surprises. But
Okay.
before that, is there anything that you wish I had asked you that I have not asked you that you'd like to cover today?
Well, I'm trying to think if there any one thing. I mean, I appreciate that we got to, cover down on mental health, suicide prevention, both in the civilian sector and with the troops and veterans, and the complexities of the issue. It's not a black and white issue, and hopefully we leave with that, and your listeners leave with that. Like, it's so multi-layered. If there were a magic wand, like if only. And just had no idea we were going to end up in a conversation about leadership and workplace
And Quigley's terrible generation.
cohort stuff and all of those sort of things. So, I mean, I appreciate it just to talk to you about it. Not a lot of people are willing to talk about mental health just on the fly like this. So the fact that you're willing to do it, also pushing the material out to viewers that we might not always get to talk about in our field. Like, we do a lot of the self-licking, like go to the psych APA conferences. We talk to the same people, and I suspect some of your listeners might not be some of those same people. So no, just thank you so much for letting me visit with you about it today.
All right. Well, you don't have to thank me. That's silly.
Yeah.
I'm rejecting your thanks.
No, do not.
Is there anything that you'd like me to ask you, though, that I haven't covered? I want to make sure. So
I
you're
don't
good.
think so.
You're
No,
good?
I'm good.
All right. Quigs. All right.
Oh, there is actually a black hat.
Oh, yeah,
it's
there's a
like
hat.
a
There's a
legit
hat.
hat.
There's a hat, and they've labeled it. The neutral position hat.
Oh,
But I'll
okay.
flip it around so we don't
Okay.
see that. But the first question
I'm getting a little nervous.
First question isn't in the hat. I ask everybody, what is the toughest animal that you think you could defeat in hand-to-hand combat?
I know the one I couldn't defeat.
Which one couldn't you defeat?
It would be a cat.
You can't defeat a cat?
I'm
like a house cat?
I'm deathly afraid of house cats. I'm afraid of cats so much so that I say I'm allergic.
But you're not actually allergic?
I wish I were allergic.
Wow.
Yes. So I could not.
I'm not letting that go, though. So what's the toughest? If you can't defeat a cat, what about like a rat? A weasel? Like what do you think? What do you think you could take out? You get locked in a room with this creature. Only one of you is coming out. What is it?
My goodness, I would be so afraid. Like, I am not good on defeating creatures. I run the other way.
Well, pick a creature.
I could defeat. Let me fill in the blank and try to be 100% truthful and honest. What could I defeat?
This in like 5 seconds.
I'm trying to, I could definitely defeat a fish.
Any fish?
I could.
Any fish.
Well, not one,
Well, I mean, I need a specific answer, madam.
I could defeat, your average fish.
Like a bonito?
Like a fish. I could defeat a fish. I mean, other sort of creatures, no, I am afraid of these, small creatures. I will run away from a rat, a mouse.
We're going to say
I
a
will let
trout.
it be.
You could
Okay.
defeat a trout.
I
That
could
is the
defeat a trout.
toughest animal you could defeat. All right.
Oh,
That's a new one. That is a new one.
Strange question.
All right. Well, there's more of those coming.
Okay.
What has been the best age that you've lived so far?
Oh, my 30s. I think just the age of child rearing. I absolutely love parenting. I love the day-to-dayness of tending to the children and focusing on them. I wish I could still do it. If the kids were younger, I would be happier. I hate that they, continue to get old
now.
and
Yeah.
I have a 20-year-old and he's not my favorite all the time. He's just not as loving and kind as I want him to be towards me, and kills me.
What would your younger self think of who you are today?
I think my younger self would be super surprised of who I am today. Like, just because I had a clumsy, bumpy earlier years. So I think my younger self would be like, holy shit. Like,
Awesome.
wow.
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Your life starts over at 18. Your memory's getting wiped, but you get to possess one skill. What is that skill?
Listening. The skill of listening. It is not as easy as people think, and many people don't do it, I don't think.
Yeah, most people don't listen at all. They're waiting to say the next thing.
Yeah, just sitting and calmly listening.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, a karaoke? I'm not good at karaoke, I will tell you that.
But what if you have to?
If I have
gun to your
to,
head, you have to sing a song.
It's probably going to be like Sweet Caroline,
All
Boston,
right.
Red Sox,
We're
New
going to
England.
need you to sing 10 seconds of it. Here we go.
Here, and it's not going to be officially part of the part of the.
Sure. Here we go.
Are you singing it with me? That's the only part I know. Sweet Caroline.
Ba-da-ba-ba.
And it ends.
That's all you're giving us? Well, all right.
Julia, work with me.
I did the bum bum bum.
Work with me.
That's the worst karaoke
Is
we've
it?
seen thus far.
Do at least 3 lines.
I hit 2 of the worst then.
All right.
The creature one and the song one.
A drought. Yeah. If you were the supreme leader for a day, what would you change in order to make America a better place? So for one day, you can enact anything. No one gets to stop you, and it's permanent after you leave. What is the change you're making?
I'm going to make a change about poverty.
What is
like
it? What
out
do
of the gate. I'm going to like, and I, based on what I know about you, you might not all the way love this answer, but I'm going to like give resources to the people across the board, just with no regard to try to like get people out of poverty.
What does that mean? What resources are you giving?
Food, opportunities, clothing, just cash. I'm going to give them resources to come out of poverty so that they can potentially have, a different trajectory for themselves.
Cool.
Like eradicate all things poverty, which I think some people might not agree with because
You think I hate poverty?
No,
Or
I
hate people not being poor?
giving people things for nothing.
Damn.
Giving people things for nothing. Like, I know you have a hard work ethic, and this idea that like just like from we don't know each other super well, but from my following, like
Yeah.
I know like you believe in hard work.
I do.
And
Yeah.
like this idea of like just giving people, but I don't know, I have this belief that people fall in hard times and people struggle, and there is a percentage that might take advantage, but like just like help people come out of like the throes of poverty. It's just awful.
Great answer. Guys, this has been The Neutral Position with Dr. Keita Franklin. Thanks so much for being on, and I appreciate all of your time.
I appreciate you as well, Nick. Thank you.